Welcome to the Wordsmith podcast channel by Pedalnorth.com. Since 2012, Pedalnorth has grown through world-leading cycling lifestyle content and blogs to be one of the most successful and recognisable online platforms in the world of cycling's lifestyle and culture. Our new Wordsmith podcast channel is a further way for us to talk directly with real cyclists and to share our passion and expertise about life in two wheels and the feeling of adventure and freedom that cycling can bring. My name's Brian Smith, and I'll be the host for the Wordsmith podcaster channel here at Pedalnorth. I'll be discussing a range of subjects, some controversial and some that need to be addressed within the wider cycling community. I'll be talking with some of the most talented, interesting and influential people within cycling and sharing their thoughts with you all.
So welcome to the first Wordsmith podcast with me, Brian Smith, and I'm joined by Megan Armitage. Megan has got a very unique story. I think we can go right back to the start. You were a distance runner, weren't you, Megan?
Yeah, it's funny, like when articles get written about you, they kind of embellish, how good you were at running. I kind of just ran for fun. It was just something that I enjoyed to do and was sort of just starting to take it a little bit more seriously before I got the typical injury and then started riding a bike and then was like stuff running and just kept cycling.
Okay, but you grew up in Ireland because you're in Australia at the moment. You've lived in France, but just touching on that kind of running career, how far did you get? How competitive were you at that in kind of long distance running or distance running?
To be honest, like I did it, like I kind of got more into the trail running side of things and the mountain running side of things. I never really enjoyed track because I never really liked people looking at me running. So I was quite happy kind of running up in the mountains by myself, doing my own thing. And yeah, I was just kind of getting into that a little bit more seriously as I was studying at the time abroad in Toulouse. So it's like there's a massive trail running community there. So like I won a few trail running races, but nothing crazy. And then yeah, just transitioned over to cycling when I had an injury.
And what injury was that when you transitioned over to cycling? And that I believe that was into lockdown when that happened.
Yeah, it happened pretty much COVID year. Like I was studying abroad in Toulouse and yeah, I was actually in the Pyrenees riding around on like a really bad bike, just having a great time when the whole lockdown thing happened. And I was just going to stay out in the Pyrenees camping because I thought it would be a 2-week thing. And then my mum rang me and was like, yeah, Megan, you need to get a flight home. This is a lot more serious. But when you're in the Pyrenees, like everything is just the same. So I just thought it was going to be a 2-week thing. Everything was kind of the same there. Everyone was very relaxed. But yeah.
See, I'm actually do a little bit of kind of very amateur running, park run here in the UK. I've done over 100 of them. And I got into running about 7-8 years ago when I was at the Giro d'Italia doing some commentary with another Irish colleague, Sean Kelly.
Yeah.
I was going to the gym and jumping on these indoor bikes, and I was looking out the windows and going, why am I indoors in a hotel in Italy when I could be outside doing something? And of course, most people would say, why didn't you take your bikes? Well, if everybody took their bikes, there wouldn't be any room. So, we were told no bikes. So it was either a case of going to the gym, and Sean was out doing a little bit of running. So I thought I would join him. So for the last kind of 2 weeks, I would just join him. To be honest with you, I was more kind of walking and running to start with. As a novice runner, it's very difficult. And although I have to say that back in 2007, I think it was, I did the New York Marathon. I get kind of coaxed into, it's a bit of a kind of bet. When I'd done London, Paris, we were on the Eurostar coming back, and I was asked to do the New York Marathon for leukemia, and I said, as much as I respect the charity, I'm not a runner. I used to at school cross country, used to enjoy running, but by the end of the trip, we were coming into London. Stephen Roach, another Irishman, was there doing London, Paris. He was on it, and I said, as a bit of a tongue in cheek, But I tell you what, I'll do it if he does it. And Stephen smiled at me, and I went, what have I just done? He's already signed up to do it. So 3 months training, I'd run, get injured, and it was horrific. I went there thinking, I'm never going to do this. And we got rounds, and that was the end of my running career. So it was 3 months, short-lived, and then I came back with Sean. So I started running a little bit in the outdoors and started to enjoy it and started to get a little bit better. By the end of the Giro, I actually pulled up with my Achilles, and I thought, right, I'm going to rest it for 2 weeks, and if it still bothers me, I'm just going to give up running again. And I was fine after that, and I just got stronger in my running, started to enjoy it a little bit more. But you're right in what you say about running. It's in my short kind of lived amateur running career, I've had so many injuries. For the first 3 years, I had nothing, but then you get injury after injury, and I'm part of a running club here, and although people say, why are you running if you get injured? I quite enjoy it. The only thing about running for me is you can't freewheel. You can't take it easy. Maybe for some of the better runners, you can't do that. So I did that little bit of running, but I thought I was still cycling at the time, and to run, I thought it kind of complemented each other. Although I don't know if you found it, but after running the next day in cycling, your legs are a little bit kind of dead, not as responsive. I don't know if you found it.
Yeah, I think for me, like, yeah, it's funny when you go from running and that being your norm, and then just pretty much stopping for a few years, and then coming back to running again, and your ego takes a bit of a knock because you just think that you're going to like automatically be able to run as much and as fast as you did, all those years ago, and you can't. But I think like since building up gradually, I don't know, I actually find it different. Like if I go for a run before I ride the bike now, I actually think, I don't know how to explain it properly, but I feel like I'm nearly kind of like I'm sitting on the bike better. I feel like my muscles are kind of more activated is the wrong word, but I just feel really good on the bike after I run. But it took a bit of time to kind of lead up to that. But at the start, like if I was to run and then ride the bike, like I was just my legs were shot. Like there was no efforts being done after I'd run. They were just, yeah, dead. And you don't get DOMS when you ride a bike. Like you don't get that like really sore muscles like as if you've been to the gym or you've been to a run. Like your legs just kind of feel a bit dead on a bike, like after you've done a 4-day block. But if you do 4 days of running in a row, like you can barely walk. Like you probably had that experience after the marathon where you just can't walk up the stairs or do anything.
Yeah, it's quite funny coming back into Heathrow on the way back. Everybody's walking down the stairs backwards.
Yeah.
It was an experience, and I still do a bit of running. I'm back. Did half an hour yesterday. I'll probably go out a little bit later on today. But just getting back to that kind of transition from running into cycling, I kind of first okay, when I was growing up, I had a bike, just a normal bike as kids get, and I was a footballer, and I always wanted to play football. And my mum and dad met as cyclists. They used to holiday for a month every summer in Italy and go on the bikes. My brother at that time, when I was growing up, I was about 12, 13, was under 16 Scottish champion. And one Christmas came along and I asked Santa for a pair of football boots, and I got cycling shoes. So that was a kind of way of, we'd like you to try cycling. And I can remember going to Glasgow Green and riding a race, and I did about 3 laps and thought this was just too hard. In fact, I'll say I hated it. I didn't like it, but my brother was there with his friends and they were kind of slagging me off. You'll never be any good. You're rubbish and all this sort of stuff. And I just thought, right, I'm going to show you. So next up was when I was 13, was the Scottish Under-16 Championships up in Dundee. And for some reason, somebody came to the car and it was sleet. It was March in Dundee. There was sleet and, raining. It was cold. And somebody came up to the car with my dad's in it. And I was in the back warming up, as they say, with the heater on in the car because it was so cold outside. And they said, so who do you think's going to win? And he went, my son. And I was sat in the back going, what? I'm never going to win this. Cut long story short, I finished second, and that kind of got the bug for me. So my introduction to cycling was a little bit different. And for some people, when I do maybe some after dinner speaking and things like that, I'm quite kind of open. My introduction into cycling was, this is too hard. I hate this. But it's something clicked inside me. I think it was maybe when my dad said, "Oh, my son's going to win," and I felt I had to kind of prove something. And I don't know if it's kind of grown up in Scotland about, and especially the west of Scotland, having to prove something. But your introduction to cycling was on a mountain bike. Was was it just a normal mountain bike? Just did you start cycling?
My introduction to cycling was like pretty much every like 5-year-old kid's introduction. It was just like, this small little bike that every kid gets. I never like rode a bike for anything more than like fun, just like riding around my farm or around the fields or around my house. Like there was no like cycling as a sport was not something that was in my house as a kid. Like I just did the typical kind of like playing like camogie and Irish dancing and all of that kind of thing. But yes, cycling was never like a sport. It was just like something that you learned as a kid, and that was pretty much it.
Do you remember your first bike? I do. I remember mine. Before you tell me about your first bike, it makes me funny. These two teeth are caps, right?
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and of all the years that I've raced as a pro bike rider all over the world, when I crash, right? But I've never kind of landed on my face or anything like that. But I don't know if you remember, we had kind of choppers, rally choppers, where they did
Ah, yes.
a smaller version of a chipper, and I was on my chipper. I was going out into the kind of rural part of where I lived in Paisley, and I was going down this hill, and I got into there was a car behind, and I kind of panicked. I got into a wobble, and I went over the handlebars and landed my face. And
Yeah.
of course, the name of the bike, I chipped my teeth. I was out cold for maybe a few seconds. I can't remember. And I can remember someone standing over me, and there was blood in my mouth and things like that. So yeah, because of these teeth, I always remember my first bike was a chipper because I chipped my front teeth. Have you got any similar stories to your first bike? I'm not saying
Um,
crashing it, but
there was a lot of crashing. My house is called like my house is called Hilltop Farm, so we literally just lived on a hill and just like we used to just absolutely send it down the hill on like just gravel basically, and you'd always just fall off like trying to skid and stuff. But I can't remember like my first bike, but the first bike that I can like remember as a kid riding around on was I was at my grandparents' house and they were like, doing a big old spring clean, and we went to the dump just to like, you know, throw away all of this rubbish that we didn't need anymore. And I remember we were like parked up taking all of the stuff out of the trailer, and I saw this like little bike there. And the way as a kid you kind of personify everything and you kind of think that the bike has feelings. And I was like, oh my God, we have to take the bike home and this is my bike. So yeah, we took the bike home, like posted it up, painted it up, and then that was like the first bike that I was just like enamored with, and I used to just ride it around my grandparents' house, and then it came home in the boot to my house, like back home with my parents. So yeah, that was the first bike that I remember having.
going from your first bike to getting involved with cycling, I know you've said that during lockdown you were living, I think, in Toulouse area in
Yeah.
France. You were studying, was it sports nutrition you were doing at the
No,
time?
I'm studying sports nutrition now, but at the time I was actually doing law and French law. Don't ask me how I finished that degree, but yeah, have the piece of paper, but I've never actually used it.
So you studied that, and lockdown came, and you started riding a mountain bike in the Pyrenees. How did you go from there to be a professional bike rider?
Yeah, it's a good question. I basically, yeah, I was kind of trail running and signed up for all of these races and then had this injury. And I think I went off on a bit of a tangent when you asked me what the actual injury was. It wasn't any big injury. I just hurt my calf. But I couldn't run, and I was, really annoyed. And it was, yeah, I think I just had too much energy, and I think at the time I was also a little bit lost. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I was kind of in this country, everything was brand new, but I was studying a degree that I wasn't really passionate about and I didn't really want to do. But I signed up for it and I had to finish out the 4 years. So yeah, basically I just was like, what are we going to do? And I had a friend and he was kind of into cycling. His parents were cyclists, and he was like, why don't we just like hire bikes and we can go and camp out in the Pyrenees? Like it'll be a good way to kind of get your head off whatever's going on at the moment. So I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then I remember I'd blocked out like strategically, like Fridays and Mondays, I had no classes. So basically from Thursday afternoon until Tuesday morning, it was free. So I used to just go and like bike pack with my friend Alex in the Pyrenees, and like, Jesus, like I didn't even have like, I didn't like bib shorts or nothing. Like I was going around in a massive big like rugby jersey that was like flapping around in the wind, and it wasn't even a road bike. It was just kind of like, those like mountain hybrid bikes with a basket on the front. And I'd go and like ride around for hundreds of Ks. Like we just go out to the Pyrenees, do all these crazy loops, camp out with a tent, and then just like camp on the top of like some mountain and then do the same thing the next day. But that was how I fell in love with the sport. Like just cycling, not even the sport. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. It was the most incredible way to go and see a new place and meet new people and see new things. And then I think the more that you kind of fall in love with the sport, then you kind of start watching races. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. But it was COVID at the time. So
Can
yeah, I
you
used to
remember
just,
what you were watching?
it's funny, like I was actually, so through, when I came back to Ireland and we were kind of stuck in COVID, I used to just like sneak out to the kind of the Sleep Blue Mountains. They're not even mountains, they're kind of hills. But it was through that I met my now husband. And then he's a pro cyclist. So he was kind of the one that got me into watching the races. Like at the start, like, the way you're just watching it and you don't have a clue what's going on. And you think it's the most boring thing ever. But then the more you watch it and the more you're kind of surrounded by cyclists, and I guess the more that you kind of get interested in it, then you kind of understand what's going on, and then you don't really have a choice because like that's what's on the television and that's the only thing that you're going to be watching. So then that was kind of how I got into it. I can't actually remember what race it was because it was kind of after the lockdown when races had started back up. So I can't actually remember what race it was, but I just remember getting schooled on what was actually happening in the race.
Do you know that I've become very good friends with Sean Kelly, and he's kind of touched my life pretty much throughout my whole life. Said we're good good friends now, but I can remember going up to Glasgow city centre, and there was a guy in a green jersey from the Tour de France riding, and it was Sean Kelly. He crashed, got up, and the whole crowd. He never took any time out, or you can get a lap out. So he chased and get back on, and everybody was clapping. And who is this guy? The Tour de France. So as a youngster, I was still kind of learning a little bit, and I remember that kind of inspired me. What is the Tour de France at these early years? Because I was only a young teenager. I didn't know you could make money in cycling. I remember Robert Miller coming out in our group, and there's a bit of a fuss about him, and I went, who is that? And he says, that's Robert Miller. He's a professional bike rider. And I'm like, what does that mean? He rides his bike. He lives in France, and rides the Tour de France. And I didn't have a clue that existed. I didn't know that you could actually make money from cycling at that young age. I actually remember asking the question, but how does he, what other job does he do? I know he cycles, but what other job? No, that is his job. And I couldn't understand it. We used to go in to a cafe in Bridge of Weir where we used to live in the Paisley area, and we would all have our, rolls and egg and sausage and things like that, and coffees and things like that. And in the summertime, we'd go round the corner into where the shops were. There's a TV shop there. So there's about 20 odd of us all used to go into the shop about 12:30 after we've done a ride in the morning before we dash home. and asked the person, the manager of the shop, to put on Grandstand, it was, and we would get 10 minutes recap of the Tour de France. And we'd all be buzzing, watching the Tour de France, and then, race all back home and things like that. But just going back to what you were touching on there, do you think if you hadn't met your husband, you wouldn't have taken up road cycling? Because, the question is, if you were on a mountain bike in the Pyrenees and enjoying mountain biking, then you probably sway towards mountain biking, but you chose road cycling, didn't you?
Yeah, it wasn't even mountain biking. It was just like those like hybrid mountain bikes, but I was riding it on the road. I hadn't even done mountain biking at that point, but like, yeah, he was very instrumental in, he saw that it was something that I really enjoyed and that I guess he saw that it was something that I could excel in. So yeah, he became my first coach and he's still my coach now. We haven't killed each other
How did
yet.
that dynamic work? How did that dynamic work of him coaching you? And because I know that, me and my partner go out on our bike, or we meet sometimes. We don't go out, start going out together, but we meet at the cafe and ride in together. But it's not always easy, working with family or with family. But how did that dynamic go along? Was he a tough coach?
Like I'm probably just like a tough person to coach. Like I'd say I have his head melted half the times. Like I'm the most, I'd say, emotionally unstable person that he could coach. Like I'm kind of a lot better now, but back then, like when I guess you're trying to make it and cycling is kind of like the be all and end all and it kind of becomes your identity. It's kind of hard to separate, like, if the training session goes bad, then, your whole day is ruined and you're like, oh God, what am I doing with myself? But he's probably the complete opposite of me, where he's just very calm and very level-headed. And he's also been through all of that himself. Like he's had those really tough years where, cycling was everything and it was his identity. And so he can kind of just, I guess he has a little bit of like insight into, how to get me through that and to kind of give me a little bit of perspective on it. But yeah, it's been fine. Like I've had him for pretty much my whole career, and he's still coaching me now. And I like briefly moved over to another coach, and it just didn't work out. I liked having Cyrus as my coach because he knows me better kind of than anyone. He's there, like if I go out to do my efforts on an absolutely shit day and I can't do my efforts and I'm there nearly crying on the side of the road because I can't do my efforts, like I can just call him and be like, not happening today. I'm doing an easy ride or I'm coming home. And yeah, you can kind of just change things where it's like a little bit more difficult when it's, yeah, someone that you don't know as well. But yeah, it works somehow.
Yeah, Megan, you're touching on a few things that I believe in as well, especially on the coaching side of things. You can be a coach, but you can't just coach anybody. I always say that if someone needs a coach, then go out there and talk to a few coaches, because it is that kind of personal relationship. It has to be that kind of father figure type of person, that person you got on with. You have to get on with your coach. I've worked with professional teams and you have to work with certain coaches. I can remember Edward Bosenhagen when I was talking to him about coming to the Team MT in Quebec, and he said to me, can I work with my old coach? Because he didn't like working with the coaches he was with at Sky. He wanted to go back to working with his old coach, and that to me says a lot. It's all about that relationship. But talking about that relationship you got with your husband, I can remember as a youngster, every time I went down to England, because we were down every second or third week racing down there, I'd come back on a Sunday night after a long trip back, and the first thing my dad would say was, how'd you get on? And I didn't want that question because I kind of wasn't ready for it. And I didn't kind of like it. When you go away to a race and then you come back and your husband goes, what does he say to you? Do you talk about it, or have you got that relationship where, as a coach and as a husband, you can separate the things? And how do you live with? I know there's a few. Pogacar and Uska are in a relationship, but at some point you have to kind of separate the kind of cycling and just try and have a normal life.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I guess cycling's kind of intertwined into our life because it's something that we just love doing together. Like, there's nothing more that I enjoy doing than like just going on a 5 hour ride somewhere new that we've never been before and just exploring on our bikes. So just, even getting to train with him is really nice. But yeah, like I think since like transitioning into triathlon, he's sometimes there at my races and sometimes you have a good race and sometimes you have a bad race. And yeah, it's kind of trying to have that boundary, I guess, of like, he's your coach, but he's also your husband. And, you can have, there is raw emotions when you cross the line, whether it goes good or it goes bad. So I kind of just like try to give myself a little bit of time and then kind of go over things with him afterwards because, there's just so much going through your head at the moment. But he's quite good. Like he's always kind of just seeing it as like, at the end of the day, like it's a race. It's not the be all and end all. And I think I've kind of come to see that over time where, I think for a long time cycling and sport was like just my identity and your self-worth purely comes from just, how good a cyclist you think, people think that you are. But at the end of the day, like if you're healthy and you're happy and you've got people that love you, like they don't care if you come first or if you come last, as long as you're actually having fun. So that's like, I guess this year, like my main objective with things is to kind of cross the line and to actually have fun and enjoy the race because that's what the whole bloody point of this is. Like if you're crossing the line and you're hating it and you're just being so hard on yourself, then like what's the point? So I think that's like kind of, I guess, the biggest thing that he's kind of helped me realize. And it's hard, especially coming into a new sport now where like I am an awful swimmer. I can't swim to save my life. So it's hard now, like trying to, I guess, start from scratch and not being just like automatically naturally good at something, trying to reframe that and kind of just, I guess, look at like process goals and all of that kind of thing to break it down. But yeah, he's been really, really good in helping me do that.
Yeah, you touched on swimming there. There's so many other things I want to talk to you about, but you touched on swimming there. Because people know that I run a little bit and I've cycled in the past, they automatically say, "Why don't you try a triathlon?"
Yeah.
And it's the swimming part that it doesn't really grab me. When you say you're a rubbish swimmer, what do you mean by that? Is because you obviously have the engine. Is the what's the dynamic in swimming? I've never really done. I've swam in the sea. I've swum up and down. I've got my swimming badges. I've
Yeah.
jumped into the pool with clothes on and get out, and I've done all this sort of stuff. And I've been to a few triathlons and kind of watched it and things like that. It looks super cool that when everybody's jumping in and things like that. But why? What makes? Because you're obviously good enough runner, good enough cyclist. What makes you rubbish at swimming?
Well, that's the thing. Like when I had this crazy idea of, yeah, I guess going from cycling and then going into triathlon, and there was like many reasons why I decided to do that. But yeah, I guess like at the time, I also was like, oh, like, I've done a bit of running, like bike is not too bad. Like just have to get a different position on a TT bike, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, in Ireland, like where I went to school anyways, like you literally just learned how to not drown in the pool when you were 5. And then they're like, yeah, you can swim. So in my head, I was like, oh yeah, I can swim. Like I'll be grand. It turns out like I'm absolutely shocking. And it's not, you don't get that instant gratification of when you're running and you're cycling where, you make big improvements really quickly. Like you can go from being someone that hasn't ridden a bike and you see improvements in your fitness and your watts or whatever like really really quickly, so you get that instant gratification of like, yeah, I'm improving. Whereas like with swimming, I had no background in it. I didn't know anything about technique or even how to train in the pool. So like, when you start out, you just are like, oh, I'll just do like 2K in the pool and you're just swimming up and down doing it, and it's the most boring thing ever. So it's kind of like a mix of not being naturally good at it, not knowing what I was doing, not getting that instant feedback of like, you're making improvements. So it's hard to be motivated to do it. So it's been hard and I'm still awful. Like I did a race, but like basically like this whole off season, I'd come back to Australia and I was like, look, I'm in the right place to learn how to swim. All the Australians can swim. So every bloody morning I was getting up at 5:30 to do bloody swim squad with all these 16 to 18-year-old guns for 2 hours every morning. And then I was like, oh, surely, like, I'll do my first race of the season. And like, maybe I just won't be like 8 minutes behind coming out of the water, like Paddy last, and then just trying to catch up on the bike and the run. And then I did the swim and it was just pitch dark. It was freezing. It was in New Zealand. Like, we basically just had to like swim like 800 meters out to a buoy. I couldn't see where the hell the buoy was. It was like pitch dark. Then I turned around to swim back, the sun was rising, so I couldn't even see where the boy was on the way back. And I was like, this is so like awful. And I had my worst swim ever. So I was like, I'm after doing like months of this getting up at 5:30 to go and swim for 2 hours. And I've done my worst race ever. So yeah, it's a bit of a work in progress. And I after that I literally was like, feck swimming, I'm not doing it anymore. I don't care. I didn't swim for like 2 weeks. But now I've kind of come back to my senses and I'm like back in with the squad again. But yeah, it's just not something that comes naturally to me at all, apparently.
Yeah, you touched on one word that throughout my whole career, and when I try and work with athletes and the whole team, in fact, you have to enjoy what you do. You have to have fun, but it sounds as if you're not having fun swimming. So,
Yeah.
well, just kind of part that up at the moment. You will, I think, try and find some way of enjoying it. And I think that goes back to when I kind of started running, and then I got an injury. I got a fracture of my femur through stress, the stress fracture. And it's for the first time I probably went out without a watch on. Because you see all these runners and they're looking at a watch, and it's all about time. So, and actually put my head up, because when I run, it was a wee bit like cycling, where I'd go out with a purpose. In cycling, I'd go out with a purpose in my training, and I'd run with a purpose. And when I came back running, I was actually running without a watch and with my head up, and I started to enjoy it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So maybe, yeah, with my advice to you and your swimming is try to enjoy that a little bit, trying to just hold yourself back and maybe keep your head above the water, and just look at things around. But yeah, I'm going to take you back again to your first race on a bike. Can you remember?
Yeah, I think it was actually up north. Like the COVID had like just stopped and we were actually able to go further than, whatever the 5K radius or whatever the rule was. So yeah, the first race, it was up north. I drove all the way up there. Um, Stayed in an Airbnb with like some old man. He was so nice. And yeah, I went there and I think I actually raced with the men. I don't know why I did that, but I just went in with the men. And yeah, I don't think there was I don't think there was a women's race. So I think that was why I hopped in. And I thought it was like the best thing ever. Like I loved it.
Did you?
And then yeah, I absolutely loved it. Like I just thought it was the best thing ever. I remember like there was other guys there, like Dara Feely and like other Irish guys, and they'd all come up for the race. And I remember like 1 minute the sun was shining, and then the next minute it was like absolutely like pelting down snow, and it was crazy. You go through all the emotions and everything, and I hadn't a clue what I was doing, but I just absolutely loved it. And then every weekend I was driving all over Ireland to go to a different race. And then basically, like, I finished up my final year exams and then I just went straight to Belgium and started racing there.
Did you, just going back before you go to Belgium, because there's a lot about Belgium. Do you finish your first race?
Yeah, I did.
Wow. It's a different experience to what I had then, because I hated it. But yeah, no, it's good to hear that kind of enthusiasm. You were buzzing and riding. We did have that in Scotland, because there was fewer women racing. So what they decided to do was put them in with the kind of 40s and over. They call them vets at the time. So there was a kind of vets and ladies race that they used to have. Now now they have their own. Now it's become so popular that they've got their own kind of races. But Belgium, your initial thoughts in Belgium, because I can remember the first time I rode in Belgium. I was racing, I was, 18, 19? I was living in Paris in a converted police cell, concrete everywhere. And they said, right, tomorrow we've got a race in Belgium. So we drove the 2.5 hours up north, and I think it was raining a little bit. And within the first few kilometres, there's a massive crash because of that kind of Death Valley in the middle of the road. There's a massive crash. I'm running into the field with my bike in my back on the bike, and it was just mad, absolutely mad. And there was we were in the changing rooms beforehand. I think it was 6 discs or something like that. I could smell this lubrication that they were putting on, or embrocation they were putting on the legs. And that smell always haunts me now, because every time I smell that first race in Belgium where I'm running cyclocross style, and there was crashes everywhere, it was raining, you had to watch that gap in the middle of the road, the cobbles and everything. It was absolutely crazy chaos. And that all comes flooding back to me. I've since been back and ridden there as a pro and ridden many of the races there and loved it. But tell me about Belgium when you went there. What did someone tell you about it, or did you just go there like me and go, what the hell is happening?
Well, like the first time I'd been there, it was actually I was in college, but I didn't tell my parents I was going to Belgium. I'd met Cyrus, and he was out there racing in Belgium with his team. So I snuck over to Belgium, didn't tell my parents I was going, brought my bike. I just said I was going up to like the house I was staying in Dublin, just going to study and whatever. And I wasn't studying at all. I just went to Belgium, and then we were like riding around it. I thought it was the best thing ever. I thought it was great. And then I finished my exams, and then I didn't even go to my graduation. I literally just went straight to Belgium, and just literally went to every single kermesse that I could possibly go to. I just signed up to every single race. I think that was when I was the best cyclist that I was, to be quite honest with you, because I was so naive. I had absolutely no fear. I think I thought I was way better than I actually was, but it got me a hell of a long way. And I actually had some really good results in Belgium, considering like I don't have like a fast twitch bone in my muscle in my body, like I can't sprint at all. But I just remember like I would attack and I would attack and I would attack, and I was so aggressive. And then like they'd literally just let me up the road because they were like, geez, this girl, like if she doesn't stop, like she's just gonna keep going. And like I used to just like I had some good races, and it was just from like having that kind of belief in myself. I'd attack, I'd get up the road, and I'd win solo. And, like I actually remember my first race. I thought this was like the end of the world. I was absolutely like I was so sad, but I attacked and I got away, and I was solo. And the bloody marshal sent me the wrong way. So I hadn't flipping clue where I was. You know, in Belgium all the roads look the same. So I like ended up in freaking I think it was like Shell de Windica or something, but I was like, I kept cycling, and like, I was like absolutely bulling it on the road, like, because I was like, I'm going to win this race. But I was like completely off course, went the completely wrong way. And then I ended up in like this some other town, and I was like, I'm fairly sure like I'm not on the course anymore. Because you know, the way you're just doing circuits, and there was like no one there watching. And then I was like, how the hell do I get back to like where the race was? So I had to like turn around and try and like retrace my steps. But they're like, by the time I got back to the race, like the race was bloody over. And Cyrus was there like wondering where the hell I was. It was it was crazy. But I remember I was like bawling, crying, like I was like, oh my God, this is my chance to get onto a pro team, and now I've ruined it. But it was like there's another race in 2 days, and then you're fine.
Do you know what, Megan? That happened. Something similar happened to me, and it was in a stage race, but it happened recently. I think it was it the opening weekend? One of the British riders, I forget who it was. He went off course, and then someone brought him back to the finish again. It might have been Brussels Courn or something like that. And he arrived. Some local helped him. It happened to me in the amateur Paris-Roubaix, where my team car, I was in the last 30, in the last 50 Ks. and I broke my pedal. And of course, you can't ride one-legged over cobbles. So I was kind of stranded. The team car had passed me. They had no spare bike for me. And luckily, someone helped me put the bike in the car and drove me to Roubaix. But I was riding a race called Tour de Hainaut, which is a multiple stage race. And it was crashes galore. And I was just like so afraid that I decided, right, I'm just going up the road. I'm just attacking. Excuse me. I'm just attacking. And I found myself like you, alone. And then all of a sudden, I started to think, why are the cars moving? And they're taking me the wrong way. And they had to do a U-turn, came back. And I was chasing, and I went through the feedstone, and I shouted, how far? And they went 10 minutes. Of course, I was shocked by then. I was like, I just stopped. I just said, that's enough for me. Put the bike in the car and things like that. Went to the finish. So I got showered and changed. So I'm there, and they start shouting for me. And I say, well, what do you want me for? They took me onto the podium and gave me most combative award. And I got a set of towels. So I had to stand in the podium with normal clothes on, with a set of towels. I hadn't even finished the stage, and they gave me most combative award. So it does happen from time to time, but yeah, it's these memories. So then, with your aggressive nature of racing, when did it kind of dawn on you? Were you thinking about becoming a pro bike rider by then? How did that happen? How did someone chap on your door and go, we'd like to sign you up? How did that transition happen?
Like I think at the time it wasn't really, I didn't really think at the time it would be possible for it to become like a job or anything. I think at the time it was a bit of a form of escapism. Like I just finished, my uni degree, and I didn't want to go and be a lawyer, and I didn't want to go on and do more exams and studying, and I really didn't want to be stuck in an office doing a 9 to 5 job. I knew that wasn't something that I ever wanted to do. So I think my plan was just to kind of go there and have fun and enjoy it until I ran out of money and basically had to get a real job. But yeah, I just went out and I didn't have a team or anything. And then I started, getting some results. And then I signed with like just a kind of a continental kind of Belgian team. But I think they were Irish registered, but it was Belgian through and through. Like it was a really Belgian team, which was great because, you're saying about the hot stuff that they rub on your legs and stuff. Like I know exactly what you're talking about because we used to do that before every single race. Um, but yeah, and then like I basically was on that team, and then I was originally signed with the infamous B&B team that never actually happened. I was going to join that team, and then that never happened. And I was kind of everyone was, it was disappointing, but then I was just like, oh, I'll just go back to Belgium and keep doing what I'm doing. Like it wasn't like I'd been on a pro team before, and you don't really miss something that you've never had. But then I signed with Archaea, and then after that, then the next year I had a good year on Archaea, and then I signed with EF for 3 years.
So it was obviously the racing with the Belgian team. You must have raced some races with the Archaea team, the French team. They looked at you, signed you, and then were you getting good results with Archaea? Was things going well? Why the swap over to EF?
I think like Archaea was just a very like French team and had like very French mannerisms, and everything was just like very typically French. And I guess like the opportunity to join EF, like I guess from a like financial point of view, and at the time when I had spoken to them, it seemed like a team that I would really enjoy being on. Um, and yeah, like you get to wear a pink kit and everything, and I thought it was very cool. So yeah, I just took the opportunity to go there, and I guess at the time I'd also signed with like an agent, and so Marnix, he was like really helpful and kind of gave me all of the options, and that was where I went.
So you represented Ireland in Paris at the Olympics. We have talked a lot about your introduction from your running from getting into cycling, not telling your mum and dad you were going to Belgium. When did that Olympic dream start? When did you start to kind of realize that that was possible? Because I can remember the Commonwealth Games, 1986, and I was only 18. I didn't know what it was. 4 years before, I was out training with the group, and there was a few Scottish members in the group, and they were going to Brisbane for the Commonwealth Games, and I didn't know what it was. It was a little bit like I didn't know what the Tour de France was when I was first cycling. And at the start of 1986 year, there was a race called the Girvan 3-Day in Scotland, and there was 2 Scottish teams, 2 5-men teams, and I never got selected for the teams. And all of a sudden, I came to one of the biggest races I won. I came to Ireland. Okay, it was the Northern Bangor, and won a big race there, a big international race against all the other kind of Commonwealth countries. And I started winning and winning a lot of races. I think I won 12 races in a row or something like that, from small criteriums to kind of bigger races. And all of a sudden I got selected for the Commonwealth Games, and that was a huge eye-opener for me. And then I turned pro, and a couple of people say, why? And I turned pro in 91. The Olympics in Barcelona were coming up in 92, and they were saying, why are you not staying? I wasn't in the eye of the selectors. Don't know if they didn't like me or not, I don't know, but I wasn't getting selected for World Championships, although I was one of the best amateurs at the time in the UK. So I decided to turn professional because I wasn't getting any of these kind of selections. And I can remember, making a couple of phone calls about, what the chances of getting in, and it was very slim at the time. I can remember thinking, I'm not going to get selected. So I just went out there to kind of prove a point and get the best results possible. And I went to the Olympics in Atlanta in 1996, but I can honestly say that Olympic dream wasn't the same dream as I thought it would be. I was a little bit kind of disappointed. So on the flip side, when did that dream of getting to the Olympics become a reality, and what was your thoughts around representing Ireland there?
Yeah, it's funny. It was, a lot of people think like, oh, I must have been like a childhood dream come true. And I'm like, it actually wasn't, because that was never on, even a dream of mine as a kid. That it was so far removed from, my like reality. Like I never thought that would ever happen. And like I guess as a kid, like I wasn't, this crazy good at any particular sport. I just really loved playing sports and being outside and participating in things. So, I wasn't even like as a kid, I was like this, prodigy that was going to go to the Olympics or anything. But yeah, it really, I always, when you start cycling, I remember like when I first started, I remember Cyrus joking, because I think it was like the Tokyo Olympics was the one during COVID, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I remember him being like, oh, that could be you in Paris in 4 years. And I was just like, that's never going to happen. Like, there's so many other girls in front of me that would get selected. But yeah, I guess it was only kind of like the 2 years prior, basically that whole cycle leading up to the Paris Olympics, that like, it was never kind of it was obviously like the long-term goal or something that you would aspire to, but it was never something that was, on my mind every day, being like, I need to get to the Olympics. So like I remember exactly where I was when I found out. Like I was literally out training, and I pulled in on the side of the road, and I always pass that spot when I'm training. And I remember like just the nerves that I had, because I got an email basically to say like if I was selected or not. And I was so elated when I got the email and I was selected. Like, I was pretty much crying on the side of the road, and I rang my mom and my dad, and like I couldn't believe it. But
Well,
then
that
you
was my
go,
next question. That was my
yeah.
next question, Megan. You never told your mum and dad you're going to Belgium, but you told them you're going to France.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they all like came, and like my aunties and uncles all came, and they were like on Mount Martha, and they had like a whole Irish corner. Like they literally stood there for hours, like guarding this corner. Because there was just like pandemonium there. There was like hundreds of people, thousands of people, and so yeah, they all came out to surprise me like for the race, which was really really nice. But like, yeah, it was a weird experience, like because you're in the village for that week, and you're kind of we weren't allowed to bring any of our family in or any of that kind of thing to show them around. So you're kind of like, you know, going out and then hoping to God that you can bloody get back in again. You're like, this is my badge, like please let me back in. And then, it's like a 1 day race. So like when you're doing the classics, there's so it's the thing that I love and I hate about cycling is that like there's just so many things that are out of your control. You can do everything that you possibly can to be the fittest and, in your best self on the start line. And I struggled so much that year. Like it was a really, really hard year for me and I didn't get any good results and I just was struggling on the team and everything. And I remember I'd put in such a good block and I was mentally and physically in such a good place. And I remember I arrived on the start line and I was really, really ready and I wasn't nervous. I was super excited and I'd missed that for so long. So I remember at every other race I'd done, I just kind of there was like a little bit of dread and worry and, not kind of fully being there at the race. And the race was going absolutely amazing. And then we get to the circuit, like just the entry to the circuit, and then there was a bloody crash. And like half of us went down and I was just behind. And it was actually, the crash was at the front of the peloton. And then it just, half of us went down and it was basically whoever kind of was on the left-hand side and was able to go around it, or those few girls that were at the front. And then your race is like, yeah, basically over because you're trying to get yourself going as you're, you know, getting up to speed again on that the cobble climb. And yeah, it was really disappointing. But I was really happy because even though I knew my race was over, like I remember I was in a group and I still bloody like just attacked on the last bit and like got away and crossed the line by myself. I don't know why I did that, but I was just like, Becca, I've done all this work, I may as well like just make the race hard. But yeah, it was really disappointing, but it was still like an incredible experience. And I don't think it's something I'll fully reflect on until like a couple of years to come, probably when I've like retired altogether and not doing sport like kind of as a job anymore, that I'll be like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool what I did.
Yeah, you do look back at a lot of these things. I've tried to have a kind of normal life. Okay, I'm involved with commentary and teams and various other things. I don't think I could do a job away from cycling. Maybe a little bit football, but yeah, you look back in these times, you think that was really tough. I've got something similar because I was in a 5-man team, so we'd 5. Chris Boardman didn't start; he got the bronze in the time trial and didn't start. So there was 4 of us. Matt Schiandri was he eventually got 3rd. So my job was to look after him for most of it. So, and because they were small teams, you couldn't let anybody go away down the road because then you would end up having to chase and you've only got limited amount of resources. So I was looking after Max. The race started. I got myself in a group. There was maybe 5 or 6 of us, and the race really kind of kicked off with about, I would say, maybe 60, 70 k's to go. And I found myself in a group, and then another group came up to us, and the race was in the circuit. There were 2 service cars at the back, and I punctured at the front, and I went from the front of the race to the back of the race.
Yeah, that sucks.
To get the service car. So the service car came in. I get round to the pits area, and I shout time gap, and it went 3.5 minutes. So I went from the front of the race to the back of the race, 3.5 minutes. So I was chasing, catching groups, and nobody was their race was gone. They just weren't interested. So I was like chasing, got back round again. The race was still kicking off at the front. What's the time gap? 5 minutes, and that for me that was big disappointment that I never got to finish. I could have ridden round and finished, but that puncture threw my bike into the pits area and just sat there, and I was so just disappointed by it all. But looking back at it, the whole experience, we even had Schwarzenegger coming into the village and going around, and it is, when you look back on it, okay, I had big disappointments, and I think I said to you that Olympic dream, it wasn't really what I thought it would be in the end. There's some disappointing factors in it, but I look back at it now, and maybe, yeah, not many people get to experience that. And what you got was that experience, that the fact that you had family going over there, and you had that part on the course where you knew your family and things like that. Where I used to ride the milk race where and I've still got a picture in the house there. My dad, it was a bit of a character. cyclist. He used to dance around the hillsides of England with a tartan blanket wrapped round him and a Scottish flag waving it. At the time, I got embarrassed by it all, but my family being there and my dad kind of doing these things, and I told him to stop. And then a couple of team managers have said, "Where's your dad? Oh, he's still here. We haven't seen him." And I told them that I just didn't want him to do that, and they were like, "What? We love it. Get him back on. We love it. It kind of helps our day." So I said, "Dad, okay, go on ahead." And that's what I love. You don't realise until you kind of stop them doing it that they're loving this. Your family at the side of the road, seeing you at the Olympics and things like that is probably one of the highlights of their life as well.
Yeah, those are the things that you never really think about when you're in it. It's only afterwards, when you kind of reflect on it afterwards, that, those are kind of the moments that, you'll remember. It's not you know, the shit travel days and, going to races that you don't particularly want to go to, or, dealing with the hard, the hard parts that come along with cycling. Like, obviously, yeah, you remember them, but and you don't actually really remember, for me anyways, like I don't really remember the wins being the highlights either. It's kind of like without sounding too cheesy, it's like, the people that you meet and like the places that you need to go, and like, you know, the, when you're on like an amateur team and everything is a bit chaotic and you're kind of just trying to make things fit and just get to the bloody race in one piece, and that your bike isn't falling apart, like, and you're kind of just making light of it. Like, those are kind of the things that you remember. But yeah, like, I guess with the Olympics, like, I think I've spoken to a lot of, like, not a lot, but I've spoken to some Olympians from, various different sports. And it's funny, like, the majority of them kind of, it's not the Olympic dream that they thought that it was going to be. I think a lot of people come away from that race feeling like really sad, and like that they didn't get to show what they had worked, those 4 years of. And, I'm really lucky in a way that in cycling, like, the Olympics was over and then the next race, like the next week you're going to another race. Whereas like these other athletes, like, they've literally spent 4 years for this one day and everything just has to fall into place and there's so much pressure. Whereas like in cycling, I don't know, like the Olympics is a big thing, but like no one really gives a shite at the end of the day. Like, there's, the Tour de France and the World Champs and the Classics and the Ardennes, and you're just straight on to the next race again. So it's kind of nice in a way because you just have to move on.
Yeah, you said now you're a triathlete
I
that
know,
hates
I went
swimming.
up to the dark side.
Yeah, but they're obviously, we've been talking about road cycling, the Olympics, EF Education, the team that you rode for. Then there came a close to that situation. Why did you stop becoming a professional bike rider? Going back to myself, I retired at 32, which is quite young in my day. But after the '96 Olympics, I lost my father, and that winter just before New Year, and I didn't know it at the time. I got a little bit of therapy 10 years afterwards, and it came down to not grieving for my father. I put on this brave face as you do, tough Scots, leading up. Yeah, so I can remember the British Championships one year. I'd lost my dad after the Olympics in '96, so it would have been probably '96. I was in Wales, and we got up the tumble, and I was in the front group. And for some reason, I think it was more mental than anything else, because I was no climb in the UK I feared at all. And I was always, when I was climbing, I was always in the front group or attacking or giving everybody a hard time. But for some reason, my head just went a little bit and I couldn't hurt myself, and I get dropped. And I remember over the top, I'd given in. I was going to stop once we get into the circuits, I think in Merthyr Tydfil. And all of a sudden, I get caught by a couple of riders, one being Mark Walsham. And he tried to encourage me, and I just said to him, there's no point. I'm going to stop. And he said to me again, "Come on, help us." And I thought, okay, I'll help you, and then stop. So I started riding with them. We came onto the circuit, and just before we got the circuit, we caught the front group, and I thought, right, I'll stay for a lap, and I was still there after a lap. Stay for another lap, and I stayed to the finish, and I think I finished 5th in the British Championships that year. But it wasn't until afterwards that I realised that psychologically, my dad's passing, he was the rock of the family, affect me mentally. I couldn't go that extra few percent in races. I couldn't push myself, and I think it got to the stage where I didn't know it at the time, but that kind of mental block that I had with my dad passing was affecting my racing. So I retired at 32, which was a little bit kind of young, and I could have gone on. But my view was, where will I be in 4 years' time? And I decided I kind of completely walked away from sports, doing anything for about 3 years. So there comes a time in your career where you have to make these choices. And I can remember during these years, you get up in the morning. I was always, right, 9 o'clock's training time. Doesn't really matter what the weather's like. 9 o'clock this is your job. So you go out there and start your job. 9 o'clock. I remember sitting there with my lycra on, looking out the window, and it was raining, like as it sometimes does in Scotland. Don't know what it's like in Ireland, but I think it's always good for the complexion. That's what I say. But I used to sit there, and half an hour would pass by, and I'd be looking out the window, and that kind of motivation went for me a little bit, that I was having to force myself out instead of, enjoying it, because I can remember plenty of times the weather didn't bother me. And for majority of the career, I was training in Scotland. I can remember training for the World Championships, which were in Benidorm in Spain, and going from 12 degrees, rain in Scotland, to 32 degrees the next day in Benidorm. So I can remember these things. But when I look back, I'm living in Kent here, and when I look at the weather, because I always look at the weather back where it is, and there's quite a few degrees difference, and you notice it living here that the weather's a lot better than it is in Scotland. But I remember growing up and riding my bike, and the weather didn't bother me. I just went out. So at that time in my career, it must have bothered me, and maybe my dad's and these type of things, but I kind of lost that. So the question I've got for you is, things were going well. You'd gone to the Olympics. You were in a pro bike rider and things like that. What changed? How did things change in your career that you're now a pro triathlete now?
Yeah, I think for me, like the thing that I remember the most is, like, I remember one of my first big races that I did when I first came out to Australia was Tour Down Under, but that year it was COVID, so it wasn't like a world tour race. It was just, all the Aussie teams and stuff. And I was like on a composite team, and I thought it was like the best thing ever. And yeah, I remember, like, I joined EF, and I always really wanted them to do Tour Down Under, but they didn't do it the first year. I remember, like, last year they finally were like, okay, we're going to go and do Tour Down Under. And I really wanted to get selected for the race, and I was flying. Like, motivation and training is something that I've never struggled with, even when I was going through really, really hard times. And, you know, I think I've never struggled with the training side of things. I've always struggled to translate that into performances in races. But I just remember being on the start line of Tour Down Under, and I was like, I just want to be on the other side of the fence, and nearly, like, feeling, you know, upset. Like, and there was so much guilt because, you feel like, my God, like, I sacrificed so much and worked so hard to get, onto a world tour team and to get to the top of the sport. And now I'm on a start line, and I don't even want to do the race anymore. And I think, as you said, like, I think mentally I was just like a bit burnt out. I wasn't enjoying racing anymore. Like, I wasn't in the race. I was just kind of wanting to get through and to do my job. and you're sacrificing so much, at this, to be on a world tour team now, you're having to sacrifice everything. Like, even your off seasons, it's not really an off season because, if you're in Australia, you're having to go back in November to a training camp to do that for a week, and then you go back to Australia, and then you have to go back again for races, and then you're all over the place, and you don't get to see your family, you don't get to see your friends, you're barely ever at home. And like that's the price that any pro cyclist is willing to make, and they'll happily do that because it's something that they love and they love racing. But I just remember being on that start line and just being like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I think like it's really hard because I don't think I got to, and maybe I did, but I don't think I got to achieve everything in the sport that I was like capable of, or that I wanted to at least try. So like that's something that's really hard to kind of come to terms with. But I just think like in, women cycling in that team structure as it is now, how it's evolving, I think in some ways it's nearly kind of like evolving too fast. And teams are losing that, they're not seeing a rider as a human that has emotions and goes through ups and downs. They're not a robot. So yeah, I kind of just got to the point where I was just like, this environment isn't going to change. And as it is now, I'm not going to be able to get the best out of myself or to perform in a way where I'm happy. And this is something that is sustainable. So I can either like stick it out for another 2 years, which was like, everything that I had. I think anyone that kind of looked at it and had a bit of sense would have just been like, just stick it out for another 2 years because like, at the very least, then financially you're going to be okay at the other end of it. But then I got to the point where I was like, I actually don't even think I can do it for another year. And I guess like the team also wasn't happy with how I was performing, and they could see that I wasn't happy either. So it kind of just got to the point where it's just like, I need to step away and just try and figure out like what I want to do. And then I realized that I didn't actually want to, hang up the bike. I still had so much love and loved training. So I was like, okay, like what do I want to do where I have a little bit more autonomy and do things in a way where I can get the best out of myself. And like, yeah, you're not getting, all the support in the team and the sponsors and a salary at the end of every month. But I'd rather like, yeah, have less money, but be a hell of a lot happier and be able to do things in a way where like I know that I can go to bed at night and be happy with who I am and what I've done and the way that I'm doing things. So yeah, long story short, that's pretty much why I decided to step away.
Did you did you obviously you must have realized that you were struggling mentally at that stage. Did you ask for help? Did you think that you needed help? Because that was the problem I had. I didn't think I needed help. I thought I was fine. I think I was just normal. It was afterwards after I had therapy, because most people, when you say go and talk to someone or go and get some help, they would go, "Ah, there's nothing wrong with me." I think we're touching on a lot of stuff that, mental health is very big now. And like you say, it's you become a robot in cycling, and it's very, very tough. We had the retirement of Simon Yates, and I think that's a part of his retirement where mentally he knew what he had to do to be the same rider he was last year, and it's another year of doing it. It gets really, really tough, and like you say, you have to make so many sacrifices. I thought I didn't need help. I went to a place to be assessed in London, sat there for 50 minutes, just in a middle of a room, 2 chairs, and sat and spoke to someone just openly. And I kind of laughed and said, "So I don't really need help, do I?" And they went, "I think you do. I think you do." I said, what have I said that sparked that off? I thought it was quite normal. And so they kind of, it's like coaching. They set me up with someone that's they thought was the best for me. And of course, I went along, paid my money every week, went along, and felt nothing was progressing, nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden, the penny dropped one time. She just pushed one button, because normally people have got kind of hang-ups with things that have happened in the past, and a lot of it stuff goes back to childhood. But for me, it didn't go back as far as that. She touched my dad passing and various other things, and all of a sudden I found myself in tears. I never wept when my dad passed away. I was the youngest member of the family. I could see everybody else upset. I was there when he had his second heart attack within a week. I tried to give him the kiss of life and didn't know what I was doing. That's why I'm trained in CPR and all this sort of stuff now. I did that because of that. So I was there helpless, trying to give my dad the kiss of life and do what I could for him, and didn't have a clue what was I doing. And maybe I kind of blame myself a little bit for not being able to help him, but I find out afterwards it wouldn't have helped at all. So, and then this therapy session, I'm in kind of floods of tears, and she hit the nail on the head. And ever since that, a lot of my kind of hang-ups and things like that have kind of disappeared. It's like a pop in a balloon. So there's a lot of bike riders retiring and not continuing. You forget about them. There's so many people I've raced against. What they do now, and there comes a time where I think in every cyclist life, you have to make a decision. Nobody has that dream. Nobody, not everybody's Mark Cavendish that goes out and 35 Tour de France wins. Not everybody gets that opportunity. There's a lot of bike riders like you and me out there that mentally it's just game over, and they stop. So, but for you especially, I think for me a little bit, I walked away from cycling for about 3 years, but then I came back. I got asked, "Oh, you'd be a good commentator." I still don't believe them. So I got asked to do a bit of commentating, which I continue to do now. But you must have been still motivated to do something. I can remember asking Lance Armstrong and Alpe d'Huez the same question: how are you going to substitute racing the Tour de France into normal life? And you've not had to do this because you've substituted kind of cycling to another sport. So you've not actually kind of retired from sport. You're still doing triathlons and things like that. So that's your kind of motivational factor. But I think my question is, you just got maybe a little bit kind of sick of cycling, or didn't want to do it anymore, but now you're motivated to do triathlons, which is still involve cycling.
Yeah, I still love riding my bike. And it's funny, like I talk to girls that are pro now and younger than me, and they're like, oh, like when I retire, I'm not going to touch my bike anymore. Like I can't wait to retire. I'm never going to ride a bike again. I'm like, that's so bloody sad. Like you never started, when you started riding a bike, it was something that you did for fun, that you enjoyed, that's something that brought you whatever, freedom, enjoyment, time to hang out by yourself or just with your friends or whatever. Like it's so sad that it gets to a point where like the thing that you loved becomes the thing that you just don't want to do anymore. So for me, I'm actually really happy that I kind of stopped before I ended up, not enjoying the sport at all and not wanting to ride my bike. Um, like I see that as kind of like a win in a way. And it is still really hard. Like I look back and, like I watch all of the races because I've made so many friends that are still, on EF or have, gone to different teams and are absolutely flying and going really, really well. But on the other side, like there's so many riders that are really struggling behind the scenes and no one really talks about it because there's kind of this mentality that like just shut up and get on with the job and you're lucky to be here and like you're very much replaceable and like you can't really go to the team and talk about your feelings because it's very easy for it to be used against you. Yeah, like it can be quite a lonely existence and you're kind of just expected to just turn up at races, perform, go home, go to the training camps, have a smile on your face. But there's a lot of like riders that are like men and women that are really, really struggling. And I can imagine for the men, it's like probably even harder because they find it really difficult to talk about how they're feeling. Um, so yeah, it's like quite a tough one, I think.
You're 100% right in that. I did a little bit of work with a local football team, and a lot of it was down to they didn't say they had sleepless nights because either they were unwell or their new born child was up during the night, and they couldn't show any weakness because they might not get selected for the team, and a lot of these things happening. And yeah, like I said, I think I've said this before. Cycling teams don't really care about the individual.
It's a
I've
business at
experienced
the end
that.
of the day.
Yeah, you're just a commodity to them and getting results. They don't care about. One of the reasons I've got had some stress fractures from running is because I was poorly educated. I was brought up, don't stand when you can sit, don't sit when you can lie, and I never put any weight on my skeleton at all. And I learned that when I started running and getting stress fractures that my bone density wasn't good, and I've got osteopenia. So they don't care. They just want you to, and the diets that professional athletes have to go through, and but losing weight, so that their diet, their bone densities, all this sort of stuff, nobody cares as long as you're super skinny and win bike races or do your job. They don't care about the after effects of when you retire from cycling, and that's another big thing. I know that you've got, and we'll touch on this in a little bit. You're into sports nutrition now, um, but for a lot of bike riders, when they retire, they think, yeah, I'll just go into sports director or go into coaching or do commentary and things like that. When these things don't happen, it's what do they do? Because most athletes haven't got a law degree that you have, but most athletes have got nothing to fall back on.
Yeah, and I think that's going to become even more of an issue now because yeah, you see it in the men's peloton, but even in the women now, like I look at like my team and most of the girls that they've signed are really, really young girls that like would barely have a secondary school or high school education. And, a lot of people, they're not going to university because you basically have to just go all in on cycling and just hope to God that you have a good result and you get onto a team and things just kind of go on an upward trajectory. And they're the only people that you see because they're the ones that make it into the professional peloton. You don't see the other ones behind the scenes that got flipped and then they literally have nowhere to land. They don't have an education. They've dedicated years, to this, like even just like socially, like not being able to grow up and be a normal, teenager, whatever. And then it just all comes crumbling down, whether that be they don't get a contract or, they get an injury and their career gets cut short. But then it's like, what happens after that? And, the teams don't really care because, it's not their problem. But yeah, it's a really difficult one. And I think it's going to just become more and more of an issue. And I think, yeah, like with the whole, like, kind of, it's mentally hard to be on the proteins, but then also like I think it's just going to become a young man and young woman's game where, you get signed after coming out of juniors and then yeah, you'll get rinsed until you're like your mid-20s and then you're done and then you get thrown out and have to try and figure your own way after that and kind of just hope to God that you have some savings that you can like go back and go to university or whatever and kind of start things afresh. But yeah, it's not something that's I guess spoken about, but I think it's something that has to be looked at for sure.
So, as a former runner, professional cyclist, now triathlete, you've always done something to keep that adrenaline going in sport. And part of a sport is, especially now, everybody's talking about nutrition and hydration and all these things because our sport has come on leaps and bounds. The amount of carbohydrates, the pro riders are taking on now compared to before is quite significant. So now you find yourself in the field of sports nutrition. Why?
Um, I think mostly because I had an awful relationship with food, like even prior to cycling, I really struggled with my mental health growing up and kind of, I guess, like food became like a coping mechanism because it's something that you can control. And then you go into cycling, and then there's the whole culture of, just, under fueling and not eating and blah blah blah. And you're kind of, especially when I was on the French teams and stuff, like that's kind of under fueling and not, eating properly is kind of like actively encouraged in a way. Um, so then, yeah, when I went on to like, when you learn more about nutrition and, you go through the whole low energy availability and having reds and your period stopping, you get low bone density, all of these, like, you're not performing well, blah, blah, blah. Then I just became more interested in nutrition and wanted to kind of go back and actually learn about something that I, yeah, have an interest in. So that's basically like, yeah, what I've been doing now. And it's been awesome. I've really, really loved it. And yeah, I'm excited like for the future when, yeah, I can kind of work with different clients and stuff. But it was mostly kind of just like for me because, yeah, I've been through that period where I really struggled with food. And then you kind of go into another environment where it suddenly goes from a French team where you're actively encouraged not to eat, and then you're told to have like 120 grams of carbs on the bike, and you're just like, holy shit, like I can't have that much, like that's insane. So then I was just like trying to figure everything out and actually learn about like the whole like sports nutrition side of thing, which is very different to normal everyday nutrition. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, where it kind of stemmed from.
What? Tell me this, because this relates to when I first kind of went to France. They were very much against potatoes, and I know that the Irish and the Scots, they like their potatoes,
I love it.
but I can remember when I rode in France, they came in and they would do a sweep of the food that we had, and I can remember them saying, pointing at the potatoes no good, throw them away, because they were all about rice and pasta. I assume that's changed, okay, but the French teams are very, yeah, when it comes to nutritional things, very, very strict in what they
Yeah,
have
like
to
I
do.
remember
And
them all like taking the inside out, like all the dough out that they get,
I
like
still
just
do
having.
that.
Yeah, they
I
still
still
do
do that.
that. I remember just sitting at the table the first time, like when I was on the team, and they were all just taking the inside of the bread out, and I was like, "Why? That's like best part. What are you doing?" But like everyone was doing
Yeah,
it, and then yeah,
they would roll it up and then throw it at you.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of these things. I suffered a little bit of bulimia in my career as well because of the emphasis on getting skinny. I'm not built like a climber, but I was on a team where I had to help the GC guy, the climber in the team. Although I could climb any climb in the UK, when you start to go up the big Pyrenees, Dolomites, and the Alps, that lasted double digits. That's where I kind of struggled a little bit, and it was always weight, and yeah, I really kind of struggled with bulimia and things like that. But this
Yeah,
was all before we had sports nutritionists. I think the only thing in my career that we had, I think when I was at Motorola, we had one doctor. I'd worked with a little bit of a psychiatrist for team time trial stuff at the Commonwealth Games. But apart from that, we didn't. So now we've got in pro teams, we've got a lot of staff members. I would say, probably two to every bike rider now. You've got access to everything, but there is a heavy, why are they taking they're taking about 150 grams of carbohydrate per hour now?
yeah, like some riders would like it's not always necessary or like needed to take that much, but like yeah, there is some guys you see like the Jonas Abrahamson guy, like he's a pure example of someone that's just gone from under fueling and then suddenly like fueling himself and yeah, having to like put on a lot of muscle and it's taken time for his body to adapt. But now like you see him and he's an absolute going in all of the races and just playing to his strengths instead of trying to fit into this kind of mold of being like, this the typical cyclist that is skinny and can climb, blah blah blah. Like there's many ways to skin a cat and there's many ways to win a bike race. But yeah, it's funny, like you go from like one team where it's, you have those like really weird cultural things within the team of like how to eat. And then you go to another team where it feels like it's nearly, micromanaged, and you don't really have any autonomy, and you know, you just feel kind of like a robot in a way. It's really hard to find that like middle ground where like you feel like you can, have what you want to eat, but also have to fuel for the work that's going to be required for the race that you're doing. So it's hard. But yeah, it's definitely better. It's going in the right direction for sure. Like I can't imagine what it was like back in your day. It would have been awful.
Well, it was just the unknown. It was just a lot of the time you're learning off the other more experienced pro bike riders. Even on nutrition, I can remember we used to do 4 or 5 hours with just one 500 ml bottle.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's hydration is a massive thing as well. You can see it from some of the pro riders even now. From some of the races where they're pulling up with cramp and various other things. And I know as a former, manager of a team, you're constantly telling. It's like working with kids. It sounds like because you're telling them to eat and drink the whole time in the radio, and surely you don't. For an outsider, you don't have to remind people to eat and drink. They should do it for themselves. But like a lot of races tend to be a little bit boring, and you have to keep on reminding them. But I've found out quite recently, as well as fueling, that hydration is so important as well.
Yeah, like definitely. And I'm lucky, like I'm someone that, I don't know when you like ride a bike, are your boot shorts just covered in salt afterwards? Like are you a salty sweater or not? Because I'm not a
Very
salty
much
sweater
so.
at all. Yeah, well I'm the complete opposite. Like I remember when we did the sweat text, like I was the complete like I was like on one end of the spectrum, and then I think it was like Corinne Ledecky and Veronica Ewers and like Kim Kadzow, they were like just covered in salt after every single ride that they did. So yeah, like their salt needs were a hell of a or their sodium needs were a hell of a lot higher than mine was. But like it's just so personalized now. Like everyone has their own individual plan, and their post race meals are all weighed out exactly. Like it's a bit of a mission for the Swannies, I'm sure, when they're trying to prepare everything.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It keeps evolving as well. As much as the tech within cycling, it keeps evolving the whole time. Um, just to conclude now, Megan, what does the future hold for you, and where can people find you? And I believe you've got, is it Fuel Like a Monk still?
Yeah, well, I'm Megan Monk now, but I can't bloody change my name on Instagram, so I'm still Megan Armitage on Instagram. But yeah, so my partner, he's a coach as well, so his is train like a monk. So then I stole feel like a monk basically. But yeah, I'm just Megan Armitage on Instagram. Or yeah, I think my username is like Megan Kate Armitage, and then my other one is like Megan Monk. But yeah, you could find me on Instagram. And yeah, going forward, I'm just trying to, I guess, learn a new sport and enjoy it along the way. And yeah, hopefully improve a little bit in my swimming and kind of, yeah, hopefully get some good results as well.
So what's going to make you happy in triathlons? What is the what is the goal for Megan Monk?
Well, I guess this year, like the goal that I would absolutely love is so the 17.3 World Champs is on in Nice. It's literally around the corner from where I live, and it actually like most triathlons, like a lot of the courses are very like, just flat out and backs, which I'm not, well, like they're grand, but like I'd much prefer one that actually has a bit of descending and climbing and corners. Like the more technical, the better, basically. So Nice is perfect because you're basically just climbing or descending and go around switchbacks and stuff. So it's great. And I know all the roads like the back of my hand because I train there every day. So yeah, that's the goal, to try and qualify for 70.3 worlds. But yeah, still trying to do it, but the season's only just started. So yeah, I've got few races to take off, and then hopefully if I can nab a spot for that, that'll be the big goal for this year.
Okay, Megan, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I wish you all the best in the
Thank
future.
you.
So, thank you for being our first ever guest in the Wordsmith podcast.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay. I think we are.
Thanks for listening to the Wordsmith podcast here at Pedalnorth. And let's share some time listening and talking with some truly fascinating and, yes, inspiring people. Don't forget to enjoy your own cycling journey. And if you have something that you'd like us to discuss here at the Wordsmith podcast, then get in touch.